Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In this video, we're going to be discussing the new Hogwarts Legacy game that was announced on the PlayStation YouTube channel last week. Now, since the game has been announced, many fans have been asking themselves, what's it all about? Is it canon? Are we going to see the characters that we grew up watching? The trailer, which boasts an impressive 10 million views in its first week, reveals very little about the game, other than that we will be a student attending Hogwarts in the late 1800s. Late 1800s is a pretty broad time frame, and this terminology would generally be used to describe the time period between 1870 and 1899, which leaves 29 years of events that could potentially coincide with the new game. In this video, I'm going to be exploring some of the events of the Wizarding world during the 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s, and speculating on some of the events that we may see transpire or hear about in the game. Before we get started, let's get one thing clear. Avalanche Software and Portkey Games, who are creating the game, have been very open about their dedication to keeping the game authentic to the original franchise. What authentic means, at least from my perspective, is that they're going to preserve canon. Only time will be able to dictate whether they follow up with that statement or not, but I really hope they do. Adrian Ropp, head of story at Avalanche Software, who are bringing us the game alongside Portkey Games, had this to say. When the first book came out, I became an instant fan. This is a labor of love, and the real magic comes from the dedication and imagination of a team who wants nothing less than to make this an authentic and compelling Wizarding World game. This cements the fact that Portkey and Avalanche are taking their task very seriously, and will be attempting to approach the Wizarding World from a new perspective, while preserving the elements of the Wizarding world that we've already been exposed to. Without further ado, let's get started and begin by taking a look at the events of the late 1800s, events that very well may coincide with the new game. 1872. Bolandi's exquisite crystallized pineapple was first introduced to the world. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Pineapple? Hear me out. It just so happens that Bolandi's was the brand of crystallized pineapple that Tom Riddle gave to Horace Slughorn on the day that Slughorn provided him with information on creating Horcruxes. While I'm sure Riddle would have been able to convince Slughorn to tell him, pineapple or not, it certainly helped his case. 1875. Gripping charms are discovered. Discovered in 1875, the gripping charm was a charm that revolutionized Quidditch and the design of the quaffle, as it allowed chasers to hold, throw, and catch the ball with one hand, eliminating the need for straps or finger holes. 1875. The decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery is passed by the Ministry of Magic. The decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery was a bylaw of the Ministry of Magic that banned the use of underage magic used outside of school. This decree is of particular importance to the Harry Potter storyline, as Harry was purportedly in violation of this decree before being exonerated when he used the Patronus charm on Dementors in the Order of the Phoenix. This bylaw is enforced by the improper use of magic office inside of the Ministry of Magic, and you might remember Harry receiving a certain letter from a Miss Mafalda Hopkirk. Dear Mr. Potter, we have received intelligence that you performed the Patronus charm at 23 minutes past 9 this evening in a Muggle-inhabited area and in the presence of a Muggle. 1876. The Peeves vs. Rancorous Carp incident. In the year 1876, there was an incident involving Peeves the Poltergeist and then Hogwarts caretaker Rancorous Carp. Rancorous Carp preceded both Apollyon Pringle and Argus Filch, and was caretaker for many years. I expect that we will see him in the game in some capacity. Rancorous, in an effort to trap and capture Peeves, set up an elaborate trap. However, when his trap failed, it led to Peeves acquiring several dangerous weapons, resulting in an evacuation of the school. Whether this will make it into the game or not is unclear, but it was certainly eventful, and it all occurred right at Hogwarts School. 1877. The 393rd Quidditch World Cup. The Quidditch World Cup can be described as follows: a source of vehement disagreements, a security risk for all who attend it, and a frequent focus for unrest and protest. The Quidditch World Cup is simultaneously the most exhilarating sporting event on Earth and a logistical nightmare for the host nation. In 1877, the 393rd Quidditch World Cup was held in Rin Desert, Kazakhstan. This particular World Cup went down in history as the tournament that nobody remembers. For reasons unknown, no one in the Wizarding world could remember a single match of the whole tournament after it had ended. There are several theories for why no one could remember, the first being that mass memory charms were cast by the Goblin Liberation Front. and another speculating that there may have been a breakout of Cerebrumus spatagroit, a fungus that causes memory loss and confusion. So that's the 1870s. But what about the 1880s? The 1880s were actually the years that many notable figures in Harry Potter lore were born, which is why I find it particularly interesting that Hogwarts Legacy happens to be set in the late 1800s. In the year 1880, none other than Voldemort's grandfather, who was also called Tom Riddle, very original, I know, was born. Tom Riddle and his wife Mary hailed from Little Hangleton, and they had one son also named Tom. Their son Tom is the same Tom that was bewitched by Mary Gaunt, and the same Tom that was the father of Lord Voldemort. Just 1 year later, in the year 1881, Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore was born. Albus's parents were Percival and Kendra Dumbledore, and at the time of Albus's birth, the family lived in Mold on the Wold. Albus was their first child. In the same year, 1881, famous pureblood wizard and lifelong friend of Albus Dumbledore, Elphias Doge, was born. Doge was a powerful wizard and, during the First Wizarding War, joined the Order of the Phoenix in an effort to help oppose Lord Voldemort and the Death Eaters. Fast forward to the year 1883, and there were even more notable births. First, Mary Riddle was born, the grandmother of Lord Voldemort, and shortly after that, in the same year, none other than Gellert Grindelwald was born. In 1884, the Dumbledores had their second child, Aberforth, and in 1885, they had their third child, Ariana. The 1880s were truly important years in wizarding history, as so many witches and wizards, good and bad, can be closely linked to this particular time. I find it really interesting that within 5 years, Voldemort's grandparents, Albus Dumbledore and his siblings, and Gellert Grindelwald were all born. But as the 1890s closely followed, a lot of important things happened then as well. In 1892, Albus Dumbledore began studying at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and was sorted into Gryffindor House. In 1895, his brother, Aberforth, began attending the school as well. And though it isn't confirmed, it's suspected that he was also in Gryffindor. Sometime between these two dates, Grindelwald also would have begun his studies. However, he was a student of Durmstrang Institute, not Hogwarts. Fast forward to the year 1899, and Dumbledore was graduating from Hogwarts a total star. He was head boy, winner of the Barnabas Finkley Prize for exceptional spellcasting, and the list goes on. But perhaps the most notable event of the 1890s, and perhaps the 19th century as a whole, was when Gellert Grindelwald and Albus Dumbledore met. The two boys met in Godric's Hollow, and it was there that their short-lived relationship went sour, when, during an argument, a three-way duel broke out between Albus, Aberforth, and Grindelwald that resulted in the death of Dumbledore's sister. Anyway, that's a rough summary of some important canon events that occurred during the late 19th century. Whether we see or hear of any of this happening is up to Avalanche and Portkey to decide, but I expect that we will at least catch a whiff. And that's it for this video. What events of the late 19th century surprised you? What important events did I miss? Do you think that Hogwarts Legacy is going to feature or mention any of this? Let me know down in the comment section below. Until next time, you're a wizard, Harry.